Much news going on that I wanted to get a man he's no stranger to our show, and our Chats with Congress continue with Senator Al Franken, who's with us for about the next 22 minutes. Hi, Senator.
Hi, Roshini.
So much going on. Let's first start with the aftermath of what's been happening in Paris, in Belgium, the Charlie Hebdo attacks, and just the world response to that terror.
Well, it was just an atrocity, and everyone's heart went out to the French and to the families, and also it brings up the issue of how we protect ourselves around the world against terrorism, including here. And so we're talking a lot about cyber security. We just had a breach today at a small one at a college here, but the president was with the Prime Minister of Great Britain yesterday, and talking about enhanced security, and there's that balance between surveillance and national security and privacy that we have to strike. This was guys being, or people being killed because they were doing satire, and
which you are no stranger to.
Yeah, and and I know that there's fear among cartoonists, but this is just, we have there really is a war that we're fighting with terrorists, and we see it in not just in the Middle East, but now in Africa. And this is a worldwide fight.
The president getting some flack for not being in Paris or not really sending a high-profile representative. What are your thoughts about that during the March for Unity last weekend?
The White House acknowledged that they had made a mistake. To me, this is sort of what the vice president is. It's almost as if the founders sort of, when they wrote the Constitution, conceived the vice president as the guy that does this kind of thing. There are probably security concerns, but if Angela Merkel is there and Netanyahu, and we probably they made a mistake not sending, say, Secretary Kerry.
It was a really amazing visual, seeing all those world leaders locking arms. It did seem, however, very EU-led, like a lot of Europe's leaders. It was kind of their time to take the stage. And I'm not saying we should not have had someone there, because I would have loved to have seen Biden there. But maybe we might have upstaged it a little also.
Well, anytime you have, the president or the vice president there, it becomes an American thing. And so it was good to see that the world is united against this kind of terror without our presence there, in a way. So that's a point. That's a good point.
So this has really garnered a lot of commentary on Facebook, all over social media. And I have to share the commentary that came from a person who's actually an American. I believe he's a Minnesotan. He lives in Paris. His name is Mark Sherwood, and he comments frequently on Facebook about the show, about guests, about WCCO radio. And he posted a video from Saudi Arabia of a man allegedly. This person found out that he believed his wife had done something to their son, took him out into the middle of the street and beheaded her publicly. Put a black bag over her head, but beheaded her publicly. It's very tragic, very sad video, very graphic video, Senator. And his question to you is, why are we supporting the Saudis when this is going on in their country?
Well, I think as people remember, it was of the terrorists at 9/11, almost all, if not all of them, were from Saudi Arabia. And this is very disturbing. They teach in their schools a very extreme version of Islam, and have helped promote finance terror attacks around the world, or especially in Afghanistan and those areas. So, and what the royal family does and very wealthy people in Saudi Arabia do in terms of financing that is something that we should take them to task for. This is, we've seen when you've had the Arab Spring, how quickly these states can turn into absolute chaos. So I think we're dealing with a source of oil and a source of stability, I guess.
You mentioned oil in light of the fact that now the U.S. seems to be becoming a little more or closer to, I don't know if we're completely self-sufficient, price of gas going down for us. Will this help us to distance ourselves from some of the countries in the Middle East that are oil producers, but who are also have a terrible record when it comes to human rights and and treatment of women?
Well, we've had a renaissance in our ability to produce oil from shale. I think OPEC has been weakened, and I think that's good. So, to the extent that we can distance ourselves from those regimes, I think that's a good thing. But the Middle East is a troubled area and will be for a very, very long time.
Yeah, and there's no simple solution to that, right? Okay, we've got a question coming in from a listener. Please ask the Honorable Al Franken why he and Amy Klobuchar voted to reduce the military pension by 1% per year until the individual reaches retirement age. I retired when I was 38. I do not make much on my pension. In fact, I work 2 full-time jobs just to keep my head above water.
Well, this is something we also voted to try to reverse. It was part of a package that just had to be passed, and it came from the House of Representatives that way. But after that, we voted to rescind that.
All right. I also want you to give some comment on some big news out of the U.S. Supreme Court. They announced a few days ago, actually just on Friday, that they would take up the issue of same-sex marriage. Same-sex marriage is recognized in 36 states, including Minnesota and the District of Columbia. But in light of a Sixth Circuit U.S. federal court's decision, the U.S. Supreme Court says it really needs to weigh in and give some clarity. So it will hear this in April.
Well, every other circuit court had kind of ruled the other way, that same-sex marriage, it's unconstitutional to prohibit it in states. And this circuit was the first to rule the other way. And then when there's a conflict in circuits, that's when the Supreme Court takes this kind of thing up. I think it's not a good bet to predict on how the Supreme Court will decide. But as you say, it's 36 or something like that, 36, 38 states that have same-sex marriage legalized. My suspicion, and actually when the Defense of Marriage Act was overturned in the last Supreme Court decision, Justice Scalia said that this is going to open up, this will only be interpreted as saying that that same-sex marriage is constitutional. And I think he was right. I don't think that was the intention of what he said, of his writing it in his decision, but it's actually been cited by the circuit courts. I think that the only consistent way to rule is that it is constitutional.
We're going to take a real quick break and then more with Senator Al Franken. I welcome your calls, 651-989-9226, 866-989-9226, or you can text 81807.
You're listening to News Radio 830.
Broadcasting from the Land O'Lakes studio.
WCCO.
Roshini Rajkumar back with you. Our Chats with Congress series continues. Senator Al Franken is in the House. Your calls and texts are welcome. Text line 81807, phone line 866-989-9226. Dan from LeSueur. Thanks so much, Dan, for holding. What is your question for the Senator?
Thank you. Roshini and Senator Franken for coming on. I'm greatly grateful for that. When I hear in the radio, Senator, that we have $18 trillion in debt, federal government, and we have at least $100 trillion in unfunded liabilities, it really is scary where our country's going and the uncharted ground that we're entering, our territory. I think that the devastation could be extraordinary if we can't fund the military, we can't fund bridges and roads because the government is bankrupted. And I'd like to know if maybe the Democrats in politics would reconsider a lot of their ideas on government spending to try to rein this debt in.
Okay. Well, that's a big subject, obviously. One of the things that's been happening during the last 6 years is that we've seen the deficit, not the debt, obviously, but the deficit come down dramatically. It's lower as a percentage of GDP than it was during the Bush administration. And that's a good sign. One of the reasons we did the Affordable Care Act, and I know there's a lot of controversy about it, but it is to get health care costs under control and slowing the growth, which has happened. We've had the slowest growth in health care costs on record for quite a number of years, some of it due to the ACA, some of it due to other things. And bending that cost curve, which is what we said was the purpose of that, we've extended by about 13 years the solvency of Medicare. And those were ballooning. I mean, those were growing out of control. And that's very important. I've got some areas where I think that Dan talked about military spending. We're on track to spend $1 trillion over the next 3 decades on updating our nuclear arsenal. This is something I've talked about.
It's pretty mind-blowing.
Well, we will never use these weapons. I mean, we need to have a credible deterrent. But what we're doing, we're not going to do this. We're not going to spend this $1 trillion. But I don't want to waste a lot of money in the next 10 years and then reverse course. This is ridiculous.
Senator, you hear that number, and I think, why is Congress saying we don't have money for education, for veterans, when you hear $1 trillion could go toward defense?
Well, this isn't toward defense. We need to spend money on defense. This is for a nuclear deterrent, and I really believe for upgrading our nuclear arsenal. And so I've been reaching across party lines in this. I think this is an area that we have to wrap our arms around. But I also think that there are areas, and the president has been introduced this idea about community and technical college. One of the reasons that our economy hasn't been growing as much as it should is that we have seen this globalization and this increased sophistication of technology, and we are not keeping up with the rest of the world as we should. We used to be number one in the world in the percentage of our population that graduated college. We've fallen to like number 9, and we're going in the wrong direction. And that's why the president is talking about either free or making sure that that our students can go and people in mid-career can go to community and technical college and train up for these high-skill jobs. I was just up in Northeast Minnesota on rural health care. I'm co-chair of the Rural Health Caucus. And we have a skills gap in medicine, in healthcare. And we need to train our workforce for those jobs. We need people to go to, in some cases, medical school for that, but we also need nurses, and we need people who can go to get an education at community and technical colleges, but also in manufacturing and IT. And this is something that I've been talking about. We need to out-educate the rest of the world.
What are you hearing when you go on these tours? And I know this is not a new thing for you. It's kind of a new leg of your rural healthcare initiative.
Sure.
But when you're talking to people in that zone, when you're talking to people in manufacturing, and they're saying to you, look, we have a looming labor shortage. We need skilled people.
It's not looming. We have
it's
a
here.
workforce. Yeah.
But what's the reason? Like, why are people not going there? I thought I heard numbers like at least a couple thousand jobs in just rural healthcare alone that are open.
There is a skills gap, and there are certain business sectors where there are several million jobs nationwide, over 4.5 million jobs nationwide, where businesses could need people right now. And if we had the skilled workers, we'd have 4.5 million jobs right now. And those are in manufacturing is coming back to the United States for a number of reasons. One of which is the low energy costs here. The other is because of the growing sophistication of technology, a bigger piece of the budget of manufacturing, of the cost of manufacturing, is in the technology, in the machinery, and the labor force that's needed needs to be higher skilled. So that's why, using low-skilled workers overseas is not an advantage anymore. And with our lower energy costs, manufacturing is coming here. But we need people to fill these high-skilled jobs that are good middle-class jobs. And the best way to approach our deficits, and this is to Dan's question, is to grow our economy. That's the best answer to all of this, is to grow our economy. And we have seen over the last 30 or so years the middle class being hollowed out. And the economy has always grown the most when there is a strong, vibrant middle class, when there are people to spend money. And also, when there's a strong, vibrant middle class, people from who are aspiring to be in the middle class, there is much more vibrancy and movement. There are more entrepreneurs in a society and in our country when there is a strong, vibrant middle class, and it's just better for our economy. And that's why my emphasis has been so much on building a strong middle class.
All right, I'm going to ask you this really quickly because
Sure.
I know we have to say goodbye to you, Senator Franken, but a listener says, what was the urgency of pushing the Keystone XL pipeline through Congress given the current status of crude oil prices?
Well, that's a good question. I don't want to circumvent the process. I have, I think Tuesday we'll be having a press conference on this. I have an amendment to this on requiring that we use American steel in this Canadian project that's going through our country. But I agree with the listener that I don't want to circumvent the process. There are still agencies that need to weigh in that haven't weighed in. But I understand also the people's impatience on this. We have seen, obviously, the price of oil go down, and because of that, the sort of urgency on Keystone, the tar sands oil is the most expensive oil to produce, and there may be no urgency in terms of this pipeline because of the price of oil going down as fast as it has.
All right. Now, I know you have to get to a 1 o'clock, so we'll say goodbye to Senator Franken for this edition of Chats with Congress, which will continue throughout the year. So maybe Senator Franken will come back. And
I will.
All of the entire Minnesota delegation is invited. So if you haven't heard yet, we had Congressman Ellis